Take 2. Don't blame the edit has become Drag Race's catch-all phrase for production to basically avoid all responsibility for the very real harm that they cause to their contestants, and made them less culpable in the things they are actively doing. And unfortunately, the fan base has also latched onto this hook, line, and sinker. They use this catchphrase anytime a queen complains about the way they were portrayed on the show or the way they were edited on the show. Fans say, well, you said what you said and you did what you did, and so the edit didn't change anything about you. It just presented what the truth was and you don't like it. This, I think, is propaganda, and I think it's dangerous that so many fans have latched onto the idea. This is a default response to ignore the very clear responsibility that the producers have over these real people who have real life consequences to how the show portrays them. The reality is that the edit informs our entire perspective of each contestant on Drag Race. And I want to talk about a couple different archetypes that exist on Drag Race. Namely, one that I've already done a video on, which is the Jan edit. Jan was a contestant who showed up in Drag Race season 12. But if you look back, the edit that Jan got is very similar to queens like Chanel in season 1, or Thorgy in season 8, or All Stars 3. These queens who are maybe a little too much, who provide a lot of energy to the show but are generally unfocused, that the judges never connect to. If they do, it's for a short period of time, and they berate these queens, they embarrass these queens, and they give them an edit that makes them seem delusional or difficult to work with. There are some queens like Thorgy who come out with a positive image among the fans, but there are plenty of people who are always going to say negative things about the Jans of the world. There's the very heavy villain edit that reality TV has leaned into for years. They will pick someone who they deem villainous, whether that be by their own actions, someone like Jeremy in season 4 or Roxy in season 5, even Eureka later on down the road. They give Vixen a villain edit. And we would not perceive these contestants as villains had they not gotten the edit they did. Look at the way that season 14 portrayed their Snatch game, which in my opinion was not unfunny at all. It was quite mid, but it wasn't unfunny. There were some good jokes, but they show Raven and Dove cringing to everything. It makes the audience cringe, and I think we're in a time period right now where a lot of people can't think for themselves, and so Drag Race leans in on that. They make the audience think something is funny or unfunny, or that someone is being rotten, or that someone is being difficult. They'll give us buzzwords about a contestant that then the fans will parrot later on, and I'm guilty of doing this. The edit solidifies a story, and Drag Race at the end of the day is a storytelling show. If you look at the way that the seasons are composed, there is someone from the very beginning who is meant to be the front runner, the person that we are supposed to look at and think they're gonna win the season. They're doing so good. There's someone who is antagonizing and activating them, someone that we're supposed to root against, that propels our hero to the end, someone who's creating tension and conflict in the room. There's an underdog player, someone that ends up in the bottom a lot, maybe not necessarily justified, and is doing fairly well, gets up-down critiques quite frequently, with the intention of shaping and molding them into someone that we could root for that might not win and probably won't win, but could win. There are queens that are edited to be very specific archetypes, and we see those archetypes crop up again and again through the seasons. There's queens who just aren't doing drag right, who, no matter what they do, Rue and Michelle are constantly frustrated with them. They are always giving them negative critique. They're letting the judges down at every turn, and either they break down and cry about it on the runway like Coco Montrese, or they have a meltdown. And these edits that these queens get inform the audience how we're supposed to respond to those characters on TV. And then the show goes on to say, well, don't blame the edit. You said what you said. Even the lyrics, don't blame it on the edit, has something along the lines of, all of these shows around the world and everywhere you go, you'll never meet another bitch as salty as these hoes. This lyric is obviously referencing the many reality TV shows that exist across the world, where there are contestants that go onto a show knowing full well what they're signing up for. They say and do things, the edit paints them away, and these contestants generally keep their mouths shut after the show is over. There's an occasional person here or there on the internet that blames the edit and production and the way they were portrayed on the show, but something I think that is distinctly unique about Drag Race is that every contestant is on the queer spectrum. People come in and they're different. They are LGBTQ. They are straight, but queer. They're a cis woman, but they're queer. Everyone that goes on Drag Race is from a marginalized segment of society. They're going on to a show that's meant to propel their career forward, launch them to new heights, only to have the same shenanigans that every production company does. They edit them a certain way, package them for the fans to comprehend their character, and they don't get the consent of the player for how their portrayal comes out. They'll ask queens like Lucy LaDuca to say, "How many wins have you gotten?" And she'll clarify, "Do you want me to talk about my mini challenges as well?" To which the producer will say, "Yes, include that." And then suddenly she's the delusional girl who thinks she's won 5 challenges. These moments are malicious in nature. They prod the queens to say things, whether that be to put a shady soundbite or a shady edit, paint them as someone who's clearly going home that week. They'll tell queens like Malaysia, "If you have anything else you want to say, today would be the day to do it." Because they have a plan going into the season on how it's going to roll out. They have a plan per episode, how that day is going to play out. They prod contestants like Jeremy into saying exactly what they felt about Alyssa, again and again and again, until they finally break and share all their frustration. They use that and then edit everyone reacting as if Jeremy had done or said something extremely out of pocket. They don't include all of those pieces of production prodding and forcing him to say something because they want us to think that Jeremy is a punk and a villain and is going home at the hands of his enemy, Alyssa. That's the character on the show. These queens from these marginalized communities are excited to have their art showcased across the world, only to be exploited in the same way that every other reality show does. Of course they're going to be salty. Of course they're going to be upset. They thought they were going in for a great opportunity, only to be embarrassed, to have their makeup critiqued in an unkind way, and then the fans latch on to those buzzwords and call a contestant ratchet because the show's edit gives permission to the fans to dogpile. And it's kind of comical that Drag Race tries to obfuscate so severely and dodge responsibility so harshly, and that the fandom just rides along with this narrative and says, yeah, the queen shouldn't blame the edit. It's not the show's fault that they said this or that. These queens are actively harmed by the way the show packages them. They trusted that this icon in this field of drag was not going to ruin their careers in some way. And yet that's exactly what happened. There are so many queens that said they were working full-time in drag before Drag Race. They went to the show, got a moderate amount of fame for a short period of time, and afterwards the gigs dried up because they went home first, second, or third. Clubs and promoters don't think that they're worth booking, and so they have to go back and get a day job because the edit made it seem that that queen was bad. The edit made that queen seem like she couldn't do her job. So then they lose those full-time opportunities that they had in drag because they took a risk to go on the show. The edit informs the fans on who's good and who's bad. If you make it really far in the show, fans think you're a good drag queen. They want to go watch you and tip you. If you go home early, fans think you're a bad drag queen and don't want to go to your show. And the less people that show up for a headliner, the more likely it is that the club won't book that person anymore. There are endless examples of times where the show painted someone in a certain light. Fans responded accordingly, and then the show throws its hands up in the air and says, we didn't do anything. This is extremely unhealthy and toxic. It's a result of reality TV, and there's nothing that can be done about the machine that is reality TV. But what can be done is the response from the fans and not buying into this idea that the edit is flawless, that everyone just goes on Drag Race and does what they do, they're portrayed accurately, and it's done. The truth of the matter is that one episode of Drag Race is filmed over the course of 48 hours. And if you think about your own day, everything that you did in that course of time being whittled down to a 45-minute episode made for TV can portray you in any kind of way. It could show you as being unstable by only highlighting the moments where you were having a bad day. It could portray you as someone who is a light and positive by only showing your good moments. It could make you seem like the world's biggest devil by only showing the parts where you were grumpy. It cuts to you scowling while you're doing any activity or while someone's talking. It only tells the parts of your story where you were mad at them. Your edit can swing any different way based on the story that the editor wanted to tell about you. And that's exactly what happens on Drag Race. Television requires that we understand the characters. A hero, a villain, some kind of weird jester. There are characters that slay a dragon but don't win the war. We see these moments where someone overcomes their bad moment and their bad critique by getting a win and then immediately going home. And the edit has to support wherever they stop at. When the editors go through and they look at the season, they know who makes the end. So then they have to make everything stick along the way. If they know that one person kind of agitated a couple folks in the room, that's going to be their role. Someone like the Vixen, for example, who I think got an incredibly unfair edit on her time on the show. The editors made sure to take only the points where she was being a certain kind of way to portray her as being someone who was aggressive. That's harmful for so many reasons, not only because it's microaggressive, but because it has very real world consequences on the Vixen. If someone goes into the finale with a lot of high marks, the editors are going to do their best to make them look as if they have no flaws. They're going to take out all of the bad parts of their performances. They're going to only showcase people talking positively and highly of them so that we as the audience are primed and ready to perceive that person as someone who is a front runner. No matter how these contestants come out of the show, our entire perception of them is from the edit, because they simply cannot show us all 48 hours of the challenge. No one would have time to watch that. They have to give us small, digestible pieces. The fans look at each one of the cast members and make a decision based on what the show tells them. Because again, most people can't really think for themselves. And Drag Race absolutely exploits that information. It kind of makes me mad, I'm not gonna lie. But what I find most interesting is that people don't want to blame RuPaul or production for the very real actions that they take. They'll say, no, production didn't make them say that. They chose to be mean. They chose to be nasty. But we don't know what they were asked. We don't know how many times they were asked or how many different ways they were asked. We don't know which parts of their conversation were cut out. Again, if you were to take your entire day and have that recorded and filmed by someone, and they wanted to paint you in a certain light, they could do so however they wanted to. If they wanted to only take your negative moments and frame you as being a malicious, spiteful, evil darkness in your heart individual, they could do that by cutting out all of your positive conversations. Now amplify that by 13 other voices in the room. Drag Race has a job to take 14 players typically, tell their stories in one 45 to an hour 15 long episode. Realistically, it's more like 45 because a lot of the show is RuPaul talking, is the judges talking, it's music and lip syncing. Realistically, we maybe get 7 minutes worth of personality from each one of the castmates, from their confessionals to their interpersonal relationships. We don't get a lot of who they are. We get to see them compete, and we get to see them be shady, we get to see them be silly, we get to see challenge moments, but we very rarely see behind the curtain who the performer is underneath all of it. Those are relinquished to the confessionals and to some of the workroom conversation, and we know those go on for a long time. The editors, again, have a job. They need to make us perceive a certain queen in a certain light so that we respond to them the way that the show wants us to. We need to root for their hero. We need to root against their villain. And so when people get frustrated about their edit, that their best jokes were removed and they were actually funnier and deserved to win a challenge, or that someone wasn't funny but got another take to be funnier and then won the challenge or got into a safe position where someone else had a maybe slight stumble, did not get a reshoot, and then went home, or someone has a meltdown on stage because they were prodded and poked by producers so many times and they didn't know how else to respond, so they just freak out. There are plenty of rumors of queens that were withheld of food or water or even bathroom breaks and pumped with more alcohol to get them to say something. It's a reality TV problem. There are producers from across the globe, from any reality show, that have confessed that when it comes to reality TV, all bets are off. They've got a story to tell, and they're going to do that however they need to. And Drag Race tries to pretend that it treats their queens really well, and I'm sure on some level they do. But the post-production That's where the stunts happen. Because we are not seeing the total picture. We will never see the complete package. We don't know the critiques that are given in the moment that solidify someone as a safe position in their mind, only to find out that they were bottom 2. And as fans of this show, we need to really start recognizing that their mission is to make us believe what they're telling. And we can't believe every single thing. And it's very clear sometimes what it is that they want us to believe. And we have to stop blaming queens for saying things on the show, because we don't know what they're being prodded to say. We don't know what it is they're being asked to confess about. We don't know the prompts in which they're slicing down a phrase or a sentence in order to craft a narrative about someone else in the competition. And I find it frankly kind of unfair that some queens get to walk away from their edits and have a squeaky clean record with fans. That they get to be loved and well received, they're booked constantly and have long careers, and there are others who are painted as kind of the moron of their season, and they're forced to go and work at Wendy's or Home Depot or something, because they can't perform full-time in drag. Or they have to beg for opportunities from their past club promoters and go back to working in the nightclubs for $25, when some of their fellow castmates are making thousands of dollars for years, only because they got to top 5 or 4 of their season. And no matter how those queens are when they're actually in the club, they made it far on Drag Race, and so people perceive them to be better. And that's not fair. We need to give the space to these queens to call out production and stop using the line, well, don't blame the edit. Because the edit quite literally is the reason why we believe that some queens are better than others. Blame the edit. It is the edit's fault. That's the beast of reality TV, and we can't be ignorant towards that. And that's the tea.